We've been tagged to get Jack Duffin on the show more than I think any guest that we have yet to have. Jack is kind enough to join us today to help us break down some of the Browns' salary cap situations and questions we may have moving forward.
And what's funny is, when you have a non-American talk about basketball or baseball, it doesn't seem that odd because baseball and basketball are in a lot of different countries. Mm-hmm. But football, as popular as it is in America, is really, I get it, it's growing in other countries, but it's really an American-only sport. For you don't have a lot of foreign players playing in the NFL, unlike basketball, baseball, hockey. So when you hear a non-American talk about it, it's always a little jarring at first. I know Sam Monson, who used to be with Pro Football Focus, is Canadian. And I can't remember the name of the guy, but he does like some fantasy stuff, and he's Australian. And I'm like, I can't compute an Australian guy talking about fantasy football. And Jack, of course, is from England. Jack, how did you get into football? I know you're an analytics guy, but how did you get into football being from England?
Just playing Madden, if I'm going to be honest. Just playing Madden, and then it just got a bit into fantasy football then, and then it grew from that. And yeah, it was just kind of luck. When I was a kid, it was like the first game I turned on TV, it was Miami Dolphins versus New England Patriots. And I was only young. I was like, I'll choose the team with England in the name. And then a little while on, I was like, I'd just get called a glory hunter. And I was like, I'll find a new team. Loved the film Moneyball and the book. And then literally 2 weeks later, Paulie Podesta joins the Browns. And I'm like, right, let's just do it. And then we didn't win a game we won one game for 2 years. So I was thinking maybe I made the wrong decision here.
And everybody, D. Podesta's become the boogeyman here in Cleveland, of course. Every time there's something wrong in the organization, he is blamed, whether it's his fault or not. But that's why you got into it. You love Moneyball, you love the numbers, you love the analytics. I read your column because everybody got worked up about the latest Deshaun Watson restructure, and I read your column about it. Everybody should go read it. It was really, it kind of put it in simple terms for people that might get confused by the salary cap and how it all works. But explain to the fans kind of like a bullet points of what you did about how even though this is pushing some money, it's not actually pushing money, it's just pushing some cap dollars, right?
Yeah, so there's two things with the salary cap. You've got the cash, which is how much a player is paid. So Deshaun Watson gets $46 million each of the 5 years of his deal. And then the salary cap is the accounting part that you can do lots of tricks and manipulation with it. And what the Cleveland Browns do is not just Watson's deal, everyone's deal. They push as much of the cap dollars into the future as possible. It makes no difference for when you cut a guy, anything like that. All it does is go, actually, we'll start spending the salary cap 2 years in advance. And so what the Cleveland Browns have been able to do is spend much more money than anyone else. So the biggest spenders of cash over the last 4 years. And it's one that is sustainable. Because the salary cap goes up about 8% every single year, if you're spending 20% above what the salary cap is, and you push those numbers out, there's no reason it can ever stop. But Jimmy Haslam's got all this money. They may as well spend it and put the best possible roster on the field. Yeah, some years it's not worked, but then last year is a perfect example of how it did work. Most teams lose their starting quarterback, and they work out, do we pick 1, 2, or 3 in the draft? The Browns lost their starting quarterback, lost about every other quarterback they could find, and they still ended up with 11 wins and in the playoffs. And they can build a really, really good roster, but the key thing is they've got to get the quarterback question right. So they're doing some great stuff with roster building, got to find the answer at quarterback.
So Jack, let me ask this question: If they're doing this, why is everyone else in the league not doing it? Is it because they just don't have the cash on hand, or they don't want to do it like that? And two, is there any downside to having? Will it be an Armageddon day where, it'll be $300 million in debt, they can't field the team? Is that some sort of D-Day, so to speak, in terms of a cap hell?
Yeah, so in terms of why every other team isn't doing it, a lot of it's just cash. Because if you take the Bengals, for example, if they went and did what the Browns were doing, they'd create all this cap space, and they might be sat there every year with like $100 million of cap space, but they wouldn't be able to spend it because their owner's not got the cash to spend that 2 years in advance. Because lots of people that own NFL teams are rich because they own an NFL team. Jimmy Haslam is rich and happens to own an NFL team. And that means he can just throw cash around, doesn't matter about it. It's like, hey, we're going to get this money 2 years down the line. I'm happy to invest it now. And what the Browns are doing is sustainable unless we get something like another pandemic. If you get a black swan event where the salary cap crashes 1 year completely out of the blue rather than the sort of sustainably up 8% every year, the Browns will have significant problems, but it has to be that level of something going wrong. Nothing else is going to cause problems. Any of the guys that don't have guaranteed money in their deals, like Conklin, Batonio, Pocic, Teller, Okoronkwo, Tomlinson, Thornhill, even Myles Garrett's got no guarantees left in his deal this offseason. Anyone like that, if they wanted to move off them, they can. The reason they can't move off of Watson is because he's got $92 million guaranteed. It's not the fact that they've restructured or anything like that. It's just purely, once a player's got guaranteed money, you don't ever tend to see them cut. Russell Wilson was a rare example. Kirk Cousins might be the next one, but it just doesn't tend to ever happen in the NFL.
So, Jack, just to clarify, as long as there's no decrease of the cap, which, as you correctly said, unless there's a pandemic or something crazy happens, or for whatever reason Jimmy Haslam's like, I can't keep spending this kind of money. As long as the owner is willing to continue to spend whatever it takes, then the idea of eventually it's going to catch up with you is really not true, right? I mean,
Correct.
It will never catch up with you unless the owner stops being willing to spend. Is that fair?
Yeah, it won't catch up with you. And it's why there's the advantage of having some of the smart guys around, not just Dee Podesta. There's loads of great people in the building that do phenomenal work, but they've planned this out and they look at several years into the future. And if you run 1 year at a time and you want to sort of turn over, tear down, when Myles Garrett said, I don't want to tear down, the tear down was never a realistic route because you're committed to continuing to spend. Jimmy's not just going to turn the tap off. They're going to keep putting the best possible team out there because they want to make the playoffs. So there's no real risk that anything's going to go wrong. And even with Deshaun Watson this year, he's going to get paid the $46 million, which, I would rather not be paying Watson $46 million. But if we take that out the equation, they're still probably going to be like the 8th highest spenders in the league. So this idea that people peddle of like, oh, it's going to be a disaster this year. If being the 8th highest spender in the league's a disaster, then I don't know what planet these people are living on.
You know, Jack, earlier you said that Myles Garrett has no guaranteed money left. Is that what you said on this deal? So, okay, so let's say if he got traded, how would that affect, let's say he came out and said, well, I hope it doesn't happen, but let's say he said, I want to be traded. How would that change the Browns' current cap situation?
Yeah, so in terms of looking at a cash spend, it wouldn't make a change because they wouldn't be giving him any money. There'd be some dead cap based on sort of signing and option bonus money they've done over the last sort of 3-4 years. So there'd be some accounting for it, but it wouldn't cause a problem. I expect Myles Garrett to get extended this offseason. He'll be made the highest paid defensive player in the league. So you're probably talking around Nick Bosa's currently first at $34 million. And it comes into that debate of like, does he wait and say, actually, I'm going to hold off until June, July, which is when they tend to get done, and someone like Parsons gets in there sooner or Hutchinson, but he's going to get somewhere in sort of the 36 to 40 million. I expect that all to be wrapped up. He's got 2 years left on his deal, so he's got no real negotiation position. It will get done, and as Andrew Berry said, he'll eventually leave Cleveland, and he's got a short walk to Canton, Ohio.
Jack, now that they've been putting this cap held because of the Deshaun Watson contract, does that, like, we always say this with other teams and certainly with the Browns in the past too, when you've got a quarterback who's on a rookie deal, it certainly gives you more leeway in other areas on your team. So because the Browns are now sort of strapped in other areas, does it make sense? I mean, do you think a rookie quarterback who could be on that rookie deal for the next 5 years makes sense with the first round pick potentially? I know we're not asking you who they should take, but just in terms of the quarterback position.
Yeah, they've probably got somewhere in the region of 120 million of cash to throw around this season, so they're not limited to just rookie quarterbacks. The issue is there's not tends to be many guys on the market that are worthy of big money. I don't expect Sam Darnold to be on the market, so you're not really able to spend more than sort of 20 million probably this offseason on a quarterback because there's just not that choice to go and do it. Say something mad happened and Patrick Mahomes was suddenly cut overnight and wanted $80 million a year. The Browns could do that, easily work that within their numbers. So the cash isn't the problem, it's the lack of talent being available for them to go and pay.
I mean, to some degree, if the owner is willing to spend, no matter, unlimited basis, there's almost no cap. Essentially, I mean, there is. I shouldn't say no cap, because, like you said, the Browns would be the 8th highest, which, while still good, is not the best it can be because of the Watson contract. But on some level, I mean, that's it. Other teams haven't. It's amazing because Jimmy Haslam, while obviously crazy rich, he's not the richest owner in the NFL. Jerry Jones is richer, and the Cowboys never do that. Not to that degree.
The Cowboys are one of the lowest spenders. Jimmy Haslam constantly moans about the cap is stopping them. The issue they have is they don't like to restructure and push all the salary cap numbers into the future, because he knows he could go out and spend a load more cash, but they don't want to spend cash because Jimmy doesn't want to spend his own money. So it's a decision that lots of these owners have to take. And when Tom Brady went to the Bucks, he said one of the things you've got to change is they used to be a franchise that whatever they spent in cash equaled cap. So they never had much dead cap. But that also meant they had a really, really cheap roster because they didn't put the money in. So one of Tom Brady's conditions for going to the Bucks was that practice has to end. I want to come here and win, and if you're not willing to invest in the team, I don't want to be a part of the Bucks. So it's an interesting one to note that the sort of limit is about your 120, 125% of the cap each year, because if you start going over that on a consistent basis, the 8% rise in the salary cap's just not going to keep up with where you want to be. So it's one that they're probably going to invest about $335 million this year in the starting 53-man roster, including Watson's money in that. But the salary cap's only going to be $272.5 million. That's the current projection. The Browns think it's going to be slightly higher per the recent ESPN article, but they're going to go out and spend a load of money. It might not be on big flashy names. It might be more like, hey, they're going to bring 6-7 guys on sort of 8 to 12 million rather than blowing 20 million on one free agent. But they will fill all the needs the roster has by the time we get to the draft. So lots of the discussions are they drafting for need? They're not going to draft for need because they're going to fix that by the time we get there.
Well, listen, I'm going to save this, and I'm going to put it on a flash drive, so when all of the mortgage analysts and the regular people try to tell me that the cap is...
You're saying Jay Crawford.
The cap is like a household. Tighten your belt string. No. That's not it. Can you tell them... There's two examples that people always bring up. They bring up the San Francisco 49ers back in the day with, I believe it was Carmen Policy, when they basically couldn't field the team because they were at cap hell. And then there's always the New Orleans Saints who are brought up about cap hell as well. What is the difference, and why did they get into trouble compared to why that does not apply to the Browns and how they move?
Yeah, so my NFL knowledge doesn't go back as far as whatever that 49ers part was. I'll hold my hands up there. But the Saints currently sit at 31st in the league of cash spending over the last 4 years. So I think a big part of their problem was potentially with the pandemic. They were probably doing what the Browns were doing before the pandemic hit. And the issue with the Saints is they've not admitted defeat. And it could have been a nice sort of, that happened, 1 to 2 years, let's just tear it down, accept that the pandemic's happened and it's effectively screwed them. And instead they've just tried to limp. And limping's the worst place to be. You just want a hard reset, and they could be back to spending massive amounts of money, but they've just tied themselves in a knot. And this offseason is probably going to be the time they've got to accept that it's not going to go the way they want. But they continue to limp in the hope that it's going to get better.
Jack, good stuff, man. Great insight. Nice having you on. We'll have you on again soon.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, man.
100%. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.